What's going on, everybody? This is Afro Think Tank. Today I want to talk about the divide between African Americans that we're having at this time, right? Because we do have a divide, right? And the divide is you have some African people who want to go back to Africa. They want to embrace Africa. They want to learn the African culture. They want to infuse themselves back to the motherland, to their homeland, right? Then you have some Africans who very much prefer to stay in the land of their colonizer. They prefer to stay in the communities that were built up, because of, history. They prefer to stay there. And they don't want to go to Africa. They want to stay in America. They want to stay in their black communities in America, right? There's also in the Caribbean, you have some Caribbeans that much rather stay where they already are. They're comfortable there, right? That's all they know, right? That's them. That's their identity. They don't want to, or they may be afraid to embrace their African culture, right? They may still be upset that in the past, some African ancestors helped facilitate their ancestors making their way over here, right? And because most of them don't have a full context of history, they actually think it's pretty black and white. They think, got those guys, they brought us over here. Not understanding that their ancestors are not only the colonized, but not only the enslavers, but the enslaved, like both. Like every African that's over here, more than likely probably has an ancestor that decided they was going to capture their ops, during war and sell them to the Portuguese or British or something, right? And then, they went out on another raid and they may have got captured and then they ended up over here. That's kind of how it happens. And just to put things in context for those there are African American and Indian mixed hybrids over here. They are. That is the truth. Very small and minute, but they do exist. But for the vast majority of pretendians, they're ashamed that they were enslaved, right, by these Europeans who they know they're not inferior to. And they're also upset that certain Africans sold us into, they're hurt by it and they're offended. And even though they've forgiven the white man for all their atrocities, they've forgiven the white man for being, the architect, the author of the transatlantic slave trade, the designer, the mover, the shaker, the man behind the freaking the door, that guy. They've totally forgiven white people, but they have yet to forgive their own people. They have not forgiven their African people for what they see as a betrayal, right? So they cling to other identities that don't belong to them, right? But here's something I want to say, and then you got some pretendians that's just ashamed that we were ever slaves. Like, it's not something you can really be proud of, right? And they're just ashamed of the backlash and all that stuff, right? But I just want you to be clear that if you were to compare African Americans to Native Americans lost. Europeans came to their homeland and took the whole thing over, right? They also, Europeans, the way they were able to take it over, not only did they bring their European diseases and kill a bunch of people off, but they also manipulated certain tribes, Indian tribes, against each other, right? It took a Native American tribe to go and fight other Native American tribes. It also took African buffalo soldiers to go destroy the remaining African tribes that was left over after the Europeans pit tribe against tribe. So just like in Africa, they pit tribe against tribe, chiefs against chief, kingdom versus kingdom. They did the same thing in America. Native Americans were fighting each other. Europeans came and amplified their wars and grievances they had between each other. Native Americans sold other Native American tribes into slavery over here because Native Americans were also slaves, right? They helped and coordinated with different European powers to ambush and eliminate enemy tribes. They did the same thing. So if you sliding away from the African culture, thinking that the Native American culture somehow is morally better, keep in mind they lost their entire continent. They lost everything, and they're relegated to concentration camps that we call reservations, where they're slowly being eliminated. Period. Right? Africa, for all intents and purposes, survived the onslaught of Europeans. So which group is stronger? Which group came out on top? The Africans did. You go to Africa, you see Africans. You come to America, you see a bunch of Native Americans walking around. No, they lost. So you basically pretending, and you're like you downgraded yourself. So I'm just saying, that's for those guys. But the main thing is, a lot of African people are afraid of Africa. They still believe all those things that Europeans told us, right? They still believe it, right? And because of that, they get a reaction, right? There's something about African Americans going to Africa. It's something that pisses them off, to the point to where they'll come into my channel, my comment section, and they'll get mad at me because they believe that I'm forcing, like, how can I force any African American to go to Africa? They believe I'm forcing African Americans to go to Africa, or they believe that I'm shaming African Americans for staying in America and not going to Africa. Now, you can't find one video of me shaming African Americans ever for wanting to stay here in America. You can't find one video of me saying African Americans, you absolutely must go to Africa or else. You can't find it, because my position is that I believe that we're just as much as American as anybody else. We're probably more American than anybody else, and I don't believe we need to give up the keys to this kingdom. I believe we should take the keys to this kingdom. I believe we should do everything possible to take over every facet of every institution in America, and we should flood it with our own people so that we have the numbers to influence policy, both in business and politics. That's what I believe. But I also believe simultaneously that there are African Americans, and just like there's African Caribbeans, who want nothing more but to reconnect with their roots. And there's nothing wrong with that. And those are the people who subscribe to the Pan-African ideology. There's a lot of confusion about what Pan-Africanism is, because we have a lot of con men, we got a lot of scammers, we got a lot of white Christian conservatives in blackface pretending to be Pan-Africans, really making Pan-Africanism look bad. And they're trying to create their own version of Pan-Africanism, making it look horrible to anybody that don't know anything about Pan-Africanism. Because keep in mind, we're in the age of information. So people who weren't in the know are just now getting in the know. So they're being introduced to things like Pan-Africanism, nationalism, even white nationalism. What is a Democrat? What is a Republican? What's conservative? What's liberal? Like, people are really just starting to come on board to understand all these names and concepts. And we have a bunch of bad actors that's not representing the different groups properly, right? So it's up to the true Pan-Africans to make sure that we gatekeep and set the standard for what Pan-Africanism is and what it isn't, right? Because we don't need people embarrassing, making Pan-Africanism look bad. But listen, even for the haters who don't like Pan-Africanism, but I understand why some don't like it, because we got some in the community that's so nasty and disrespectful towards African Americans that any African American that got any type of pride would hate the idea of Pan-Africanism. If you were to listen to some of these people calling themselves Pan-Africans, where they spend all day talking shit about African Americans while bigging up Africans, like Africans ain't got no fucking problems just like we do, right? Like, I can understand that, right? I totally understand that. But it's my job as a real Pan-African to spread what real Pan-Africanism is, which can be looked up by the founders of Pan-Africanism. You can see what their political ideology is. You can see what it is they thought about economic and social cooperation between the groups. Pan-Africanism is really just black people saying this: hey, let's all work together as black people. That's it. You ain't got to move to Africa. We would like you to visit Africa at least once, go on a vacation, pilgrimage, but you don't have to stay. Pan-Africanism is not saying that you have to give up your African-American culture, your African-American identity, because that's belief. I may be a chief in the Yoruba, in Yoruba land, like a real chief, but I'm an African-American chief in Yoruba land. I'm a proud African-American, and you kind of have to be a proud African-American to even be a Pan-African, because you have to be proud of your tribe, right? That's number one. I'm proud of my African-American tribe. I'm proud of all of our accomplishments. I'm proud of the things that we do. I'm proud of the things that we push through, we go through. I'm proud of our culture, even though some people say we don't have culture, while simultaneously the world steals and makes money and monetize our entire culture for their own benefit, while saying at the same time, we ain't got no culture, right? So I'm all for being a proud African-American, and you can be a proud African-American, call yourself FBA. I've warmed up to the title. I ain't necessarily like it at first, but you know what? There's people who like it. F it. Foundational Black American. If that's what you like to roll with, You can roll with that. But you can actually be, despite what some ignoramuses say, you can be FBA and a Pan-African. And I know there are some FBA Pan-Africans that call themselves that. And like I said again, Pan-Africanism is simply saying, hey, you African-American, proud African-American, work with your brother, that proud Jamaican over there. Work with that proud Nigerian over there to benefit all of you, right? You don't have to go be a Nigerian. You don't have to be a Jamaican. You can be a proud African-American, but you can work with your brothers and sisters from other nationalities, right? And to better yourselves. That's all. That's it. Now, there are some Pan-Africans that want to move to Africa. Now, African-Americans who want to stay in America should not be upset with African-Americans that choose to explore that African portion of their name, African-American. They should not be upset and feel betrayed by those Africans who want to go home, right? Because here's the thing, we never had a choice. As Africans who were brought over here during the transatlantic slave trade, we never had a choice. So now we have a choice and decide what we want to do. And we should be allowed to exercise that choice, right? You got people who go to jail, but they don't, when it's time for them to leave, they don't want to leave jail. They're comfortable in jail. They're comfortable with the 3 square meals a day. They're comfortable with the routine, right? When they go home, they don't know what to do. They don't understand that world. They're afraid of that world, right? It's the same thing with us black people. We've been prisoners of war. We are the children of the prisoners of war. And we're comfortable in this jail. We're comfortable in this place. We're comfortable with that 3 square meals a day. We're comfortable with that structure. We don't want to do it. Everybody's afraid of things that's different. When things are different, right, it's frightening. And when you look in the mirror and you see something different, because right now Africans are looking in the mirror, in a giant mirror, and they're seeing themselves differently. And it scares a lot of African Americans just to even see an African that's doing something totally culturally different that looks just like them. It's scary because it's unrecognizable. It does something to the inside of us. And some people have bad reactions to that, you know? But African Americans who much rather stay in America, right? And this is home and ain't going nowhere, they shouldn't be upset or offended about, with those Africans that want to go to Africa, right? Because as a body of people, we can do multiple things at the same time. Just like any standing government, right? You have your groups who deal with domestic issues, right? In various different states. And you got groups that deal with international issues. As black people, our proud African Americans, the majority of us are going to deal with the local issues, the national issues within our country of America, right? And everything that goes along with that, right? Just like a Jamaican is going to deal with the national issues of Jamaica and everything that goes along with that. A Nigerian is going to deal with the national issues of Nigeria, and they're going to deal with that, right? But there's also a group of Nigerians that's going to participate in the international black world, right? There's also Jamaicans that's going to participate in the black world internationally. There's also African Americans that's going to participate in the global economy, that's going to put African people in the global economy. We always talk about how we don't have agency. So Pan-Africans are trying to create a global economy of Africans so we can empower ourselves and insulate ourselves from outside actors that mean to control our financial and economic situation. Pan-Africans are going over to Africa, connecting, creating a bridge with continental Africans so that maybe African American who prefers to deal with local, domestic, national issues, they may decide to take a vacation and want to go relax themselves. Well, a Pan-African, in concert with his brothers and sisters, fellow Pan-Africans in another country, may create a business that facilitates something like that. There may be an African American that wants to start a business in America, but they want to source raw material, raw products. Maybe they don't want to buy nothing from China. Maybe that product will be cheaper in Africa. Wouldn't it be nice for an African American to get raw material from some African country, facilitated by some African American in concert and partnership with some African doing business, so that the African American can have access to goods and resources straight from the motherland to sell to anybody who wants to purchase in America. Isn't that what Chinese people do? Chinese people, they can reach in the depths of their communities in China, and they can leverage themselves in America to make themselves more prosperous, right? And that what the Lebanese do? Isn't that what everybody else do, right? They have a country, an entire autonomous country that they connect themselves with, right? That they use as resources so that they can empower themselves here in America. Well, African Americans, the Pan-African portion of African Americans, are doing just that. They're going to Africa, establishing institutions that can't be touched by the white man for the most part, that can't be manipulated by the white man, that's not going to discriminate against black people, right? And when those things are set up and they're standing up and they're big enough to hold the weight of the global black world through the support of the global black world, then African Americans, the ones that decided they want to stay here in America, they'll have Fortune 500 companies that can support their endeavors. If they want to run for politics and they want to get into their local governments and they want to get into national politics, they'll have black institutions, right? They have black companies that have multi-millionaires and billionaires because of the economic cooperation on the Pan-African sphere that can support a black candidate, right? So that we can start wielding the same influence the same way everybody else doing it. And here's the thing. We got to stop comparing African Americans, international businesses with the Chinese and all these other different foreigners. There's no comparison. When a Chinese person goes to Africa, the Chinese is going with the backing of the Chinese Communist government. 51% of every Chinese company that's international is owned by the Chinese government. Therefore, they have endless amount of resources, endless amount of manpower. They have endless amount of intellectual knowledge and access to resources to be able to facilitate international business, because they're not only backed by their country, but backed by governments that own 51% of their business. So it's not regular Chinese men, middle class, upper class, lifting themselves up from the bootstraps, getting on a plane by themselves, going to an African country and practicing global capitalism to better themselves by their own. That's not what's happening. But that's what African Americans are doing, because we don't have a country that facilitates African Americans going back home to empower ourselves. That's not something that we have, right? So when people complain about, oh, look at the Chinese, look at the white people also backed by their governments that back them and give them the resources, the manpower to do the things that they do. It's not white individuals under their own power, middle class, upper class, taking their own money from their paycheck, going to Africa and establishing businesses and doing it the hard way. That's not what they're doing. They got governments backing them. Multinational corporations that have billions of dollars of money just thrown around that they can throw at these people to do these things. We don't have that. Each black person is on their own for the most part. We doing it individually, on our own, like raindrops. People may be able to flood Africa with a quick tsunami, right? They may be able to wet the ground for a little while. But you know what? Little droplets of rain is something that's sustainable. We can do that. We can flood Africa with individuals that have the motivation, willpower, and the resolve to go in and make something happen. And as those companies grow, they will start to facilitate and help the African Americans and the other Africans in other countries that also need a big institution, whether private or government, to support them in their endeavors. And the more African Americans go and make connections, even within the governments of these countries, we'll start to influence the governments to support us on the global stage when it comes to dealing with global issues. That's happening right now. There are African countries that's taking up the cause of African Americans to the case of reparations. Now, yes, reparations is something that's owed to us. It's not a handout. We handed out free labor for 500 fucking years. So anybody's calling reparations a handout is a Cunarian enemy, straight up. Just because you don't believe that reparations is going to happen doesn't mean you actively fight against it. Doesn't mean you attack the people that's trying to fight to be recognized, to have the United States government recognize that they owe us money. Because if it wasn't for our free labor for 500 years, this beautiful, most powerful country would not exist. None of this stuff will be here. We are owed and the payment is due. But me personally, the only way I believe that we're ever going to get reparations is if we take over the government ourselves and write our own check. That's the only way. A thief is never going to give back what he stole. White people in America, they're thieves, and they're not going to give back what they owe. All right? They're not. They will fight to the death before they give back what they owe. That's why we know realistically we're not getting reparations unless we continue to push, make noise, get into politics, and start being the change that we want, because we have that opportunity in America. That's just what it is. So I support reparations. I know it's a debt owed, not a handout. It's a debt owed, and they're gonna give it to us one day. It may not be my generation, which I truly believe it won't be, but it may be my grandchildren's generation. Once the international community puts enough pressure on America, who is slowly but surely losing power, losing the moral high ground, as we see what's happening in genocide, as they're forcing us to pay for genocide, as the Jews forced the first black person president out of Howard out because she had dared to call the Jews out on their genocide. So they're showing us who they are. Everybody's showing us who they are, right? And for the record, we're never going to forget that, like the great African elephant. All right, we're never going to forget that. Keep that in mind. Black people will never forget what the Jews did in this area. The ones that's in power, not the regular Jews walking around. We're talking about the ones in power that say they're not in power, but when we say they're in power, they get mad and they try to use their power to affect us. Those ones, all right? But all I'm saying is, we got two fights. We have to fight domestically. All of us black people have to fight domestically, right? And we all should be proud in supporting each other in our own, in each tribes, each group of Africans, individual fights for freedom and liberation and reparations for the atrocities that's happened to them. Every one of them. I support every African seeking reparations from every European NGO and government agency, period. And I hope that they support us in our fight for reparations. We're not going to be quiet about it. We're not going to stop talking about it just because we know we ain't going to get it. We ain't going to be quiet, and we're never going to let them relax because they owe us and we ain't shutting up. And that's just what it is. But at the same time, we can walk and chew gun at the same time. Not only can we talk about reparations and keep the pressure on them, reminding them and never letting them forget that they have a debt owed and there's interest being tacked onto this shit, we can also empower ourselves internationally to create an economy to make us strong enough economically, socially, and through our governments to force this government to give us what we owed or else. But there's no real fight between Pan-Africanism and black nationalism in America. There's no fight. We all have our positions to play in the uprising of African people, all of us. And no group is more important, and no group's mission is more important than any other group. So as a real Pan-African who represents real Pan-Africanism, I'll tell all FBA and all those guys that take the position of staying in America and just doing for African Americans and concentrate on African American issues. I'm telling you, as a Pan-African, I support that, and as a proud African American, you know, I'm down with y'all because y'all are my people. But at the same time, guys, I'm thinking globally, and that's what the Pan-African, global African. That's it. Pan-African, global African. We're bigger than just America. African Americans, we are already global. We are everywhere around the world. We're already Pan. We're already Pan-Africans. All right. So I just want you guys to understand that there's two camps: the ones that want to go and the ones that want to stay. But we need both groups. We need to take over the foundation of America, and we need to build a new foundation in Africa. We take this whole fucking planet. This planet was once all belonged to us, and one day this planet will be ours again. All right. Anyway, tell me what you guys think in the comment section. This is Afro Think Tank. Learn something, teach something. I'm out.